let's talk about another PC build, but this time we are going to build an ultra budget gaming PC that's actually pretty good for 1080p at a price of around $500. Now at the end of the video I will explain on how to make this PC a little bit more expensive in case your budget is above this number, so you make this PC better in performance but also more upgradable over time. So make sure to stay until the end of the video if you want to see important information, and if you want to buy a Prebuilt PC instead, I will leave down below in the description as well with this PC build plenty of Prebuilt PCs for different budgets for you to buy the right one for you. With that being said, let's start with this video. So first, for the CPU, I picked the i3-10100F. This is a really good budget CPU for 1080p gaming. I know it's 2 generations older, but believe me that for the price that you pay, $68, is going to be excellent for 1080p on a tight budget. Then for the CPU cooler, this is not necessary at all since the i3-10100F will be enough with the stock cooler. So if you want to save up some money, don't buy this cooler. But if you want some RGB and a more quiet experience, I do recommend you getting it. We're talking about the ID Cooling SC214XT. I really put this cooler basically for every video that I make, even for the i5-12400F, because it's excellent for the price. Then for the motherboard, I went with the Gigabyte B560M. This is a micro ATX motherboard for $80, so this build is going to be a micro ATX build, meaning that it's going to be on a smaller case, so it can fit basically in every desk. For the memory kit, I went with the Silicon Power Kit X-Power Turbine 16GB of RAM, 3200MHz CL16 memory, of course on dual channel. This is more than enough for gaming. Now if you're thinking of doing multitasking, then you wanna go for 32GB of RAM. But if you're thinking of content creation and multitasking, I would upgrade the CPU before upgrading the RAM. Then for storage, I went for the Western Digital Blue 500GB of M.2 NVMe SSD. This will be enough, especially for competitive titles, but if you want to install games like Red Dead Redemption 2, GTA 5 and a bunch of games that are actually going to take a lot of space on your computer, you want to go for 1TB of SSD instead. Then for the graphics card and the most important component for gaming, I went with the MSI RX 570. This one has 8GB of VRAM, which is great. The only bad thing here is that you have to buy it from eBay and it's going to be used, but believe me that you pay $120 for a graphics card that's excellent for 1080p gaming. Even in 2022 on a tight budget, you will be able to run a bunch of games at 60 FPS on average, and even above 144 FPS in low settings for competitive titles. I recommend you searching the benchmarks for this combination, so search up the RX 570 i3-10100F benchmarks for your favorite games so you see how it's going to perform in your favorite titles. Now, will this PC be perfect for AAA titles? Of course not. If you want that, you will need to spend more money, but if you're thinking of playing old titles such as CSGO, Fortnite, Valorant, or even games like GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2 on medium to low settings, then it's totally possible. But if you're thinking of playing a game like Flight Simulator 2020 ultra settings, then this PC is not going to be for you. Now, if you want to go for an Nvidia graphics card, you will need to spend much more money, and that's why I don't recommend you doing that. But the closest thing to the 570 is going to be the GTX 1060 or 1650 Super. I do not recommend you going for a GPU any lower in performance than those two. Then for the case, I went with an option that I usually go to on these type of builds, and it's going to be the Deepcool Matrix 40. This one already comes with 3 fans installed. These are RGB also, so if you're an RGB fan, then perfect for you. And you cannot beat it for the price. $72, the airflow is going to be really decent, and like I said before, you get those fans installed. Then for the power supply, I went with the FGA 500W 80+ bronze power supply. This is all that we are going to need for this build, and if you want to upgrade the CPU as well in the future, or even the GPU, it's going to give you some room for improvement. But if you want to do some major changes, let's say you want the i7-12700 and the RTX 3060 Ti or 3070, then you will need a better power supply as well. So the total price will be $500, but I think that it's an excellent price for a high FPS 1080p gaming PC build. Now, is this going to be a better option than the PS5 for $500? I do think that it's going to be better depending on what you want to achieve with this PC. If you want to build your first PC and have your first experience, and you also want to play competitive games at high FPS, so you want a high refresh rate monitor, let's say, then I think it's worth it. A gaming PC is going to help you with that. But if you want to play the latest AAA titles, I recommend you going for the PlayStation 5. It's going to be way better for 1080p. But not only that, with the PS5 you can go for 4K gaming as well, which you cannot do with this PC, of course. So it really depends. If you want to build it by yourself and have that PC experience, of course, but if you want to play the latest games, you don't really care about building it by your own, and you want to play games, let's say like FIFA or NBA 2K23 at a high resolution, then go for a PS5 instead. Now I will show you what components to upgrade if you have an extra $100. So I would recommend you upgrading the CPU to the i3 12100F instead of the 10100F. Believe me that the performance difference is going to be huge. The i3 12100F is really similar in performance to the i5 10400F. So with that being said, you're going to get better performance, especially in games that are high CPU demanding like Valorant and CSGO. Then of course you will need to upgrade the motherboard. I picked the MSI Pro B660M, once again a micro ATX motherboard for a micro ATX build. This is not going to change. And the other two components that I'm going to change is going to be the GPU, the most important part, for the RX 580, which is going to be really similar in performance to the GTX 1660, which is once again an excellent GPU for 1080p gaming. So this PC will allow you to have better performance for those AAA titles. If you just want to play low demanding video games at 144 FPS on average, then the last one I think is going to be worth it. You don't need to spend that extra $100, but if you want a PC that's more upgradable and much better for performance right now, I do recommend you upgrading it and spending that extra $100. And the other thing that I would change is the power supply to a 650 80 plus gold power supply from EVGA. This will allow you to have much more room for improvement down the line. So the total price for this PC, if you do these upgrades, is going to cost you around $610, which is $110 more expensive than the last PC. And one thing that I do recommend you upgrading as well down the line, if you cannot do it right now, is the storage if you're planning on installing a bunch of video games. But again, for the price that you're paying, you are getting actually an excellent gaming PC for 1080p, which was actually unthinkable the last couple of years. That was my whole list. If you found it helpful, leave a like and subscribe, but most importantly, hit that bell button so you get notified when I upload this type of content, which I do from 3 to 5 times a week. So thank you guys for watching, thank you for the support, and I will see you on the next one.